All right, everybody, I want to explain some things that could potentially happen next year that we are seeing in this whole election process, something that has been totally different in our lifetime right here for 2020, the presidential race. So we're going to read off some of Fox News' Capitol Hill reporter Chad Bergram tweeting a bunch today. So we're going to just read off his tweets, what he was saying. The Hitchhiker's Guide to How Congress Certifies Who is President, regardless of potential legal challenges. There may be litigation in the coming days about the prospective outcome of the 2020 presidential race. But regardless of what happens in the courts, the decision as to who becomes president rests with Congress. And so we'll explain that right here on News Now from Fox. The following explains what happens in Congress over the next few months as it goes about certifying the next president of the United States. The Constitution makes Congress the ultimate arbitrator determining which candidate wins each state. Congress must approve certificates of election from all 50 states. You may have thought November 3rd was the most important date on the election calendar, but a more crucial date is December 14th, dictated by an obscure 1887 law, the Electoral Count Act. Congress passed the legislation after the disputed 1876 presidential election between President Rutherford Hayes and Samuel Tilden. Electoral votes were far from certain in Florida, South Carolina, Louisiana, and Oregon. There was a sprint to settle the Electoral College tally before Inauguration Day 1877. Congress created an electoral commission to resolve the issues. In those days, the president assumed office back on March 4th. The Electoral Count Act dictates that states choose electors no more than 41 days after the election. This is partly why the Supreme Court rushed to complete Bush versus Gore on December 12th of 2000. The decision halted the count of ballots in Florida, handing the presidency to George W. Bush. The 1887 law establishes a safe harbor date to states concluding the vote counts and establishing electors early. But what happens if there are problems with the mail? The cryptic nature of the statute gives some people and states the green light to continue to count or cease counting. So what happens if a state sends inconsistent slates of electoral votes to Congress? The new 117th Congress must hammer all of that out starting on January 6th of 2021. Electoral vote certificates start filtering into the Capitol in December from the various states. This is in preparation for the House and Senate to meet in a joint session of Congress on January 6th to formally sign off on the results. At this point, we expect House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, presuming she is reelected as Speaker, and Vice President Mike Pence, in his capacity as President of the Senate, to co-preside over the joint session. Pence's term doesn't expire until January 20th. And the 12th Amendment to the Constitution mandates that the President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and House of Representatives, open all of the certificates and the votes shall be counted. That phrase is key. It has vexed constitutional scholars for decades. The 12th Amendment doesn't dictate how the votes are counted. That's why this could get dicey. The 12th Amendment also says that the person having the greatest number of votes for president shall be president. But Congress must agree to all of this, and remember, Pence is the one running the show at this stage. Do not underestimate the role of the vice president at this critical stage. Hawaii wasn't a state in the 1960 presidential election between President John F. Kennedy and President Richard Nixon. Kennedy was going to win the White House regardless of Hawaii. Initial results from Hawaii showed that Nixon captured the Aloha state. But a recount shifted the win to Kennedy. Hawaii sent two slates of electoral votes to Washington, one for Nixon and one for Kennedy, both signed by the governor. By the book, Hawaii's electoral votes should have gone to Nixon. But when the joint session of Congress convened back in January 1961, Congress handed Hawaii's then three electoral votes to Kennedy. Nixon, then the vice president, presided. But what would have happened had Nixon intervened potentially as the GOP presidential nominee who lost to Kennedy. We'll just never know that. After the 2000 Florida election dispute, a slide of congressional Black Caucus members paraded through the well of the House chamber to contest the outcome in January of 2001. Vice President Al Gore, then president of the Senate, and like Nixon, the vanquished Democratic nominee, presided. Congressional rules require a House member and senator simultaneously challenge a state's electoral slate, but there was no Senate sponsor. Questions arose back in January of 2005 about Ohio's state of electoral votes. In that instance, the House and Senate then met separately to consider Ohio's slate, but after a short debate, Congress decided that President George W. Bush was victorious in Ohio. The Constitution does not mandate what the House and Senate must do to establish whether it certifies an electoral slate. And if the House, Senate actually debate or even vote on a disputed slate of electors from a state, what happens if each body reaches a different conclusion? It's mathematically possible. The presidential candidates fall shy of the required 270 votes to assume the presidency. It's also unclear how fast all of this must happen. Now we enter murky constitutional waters, according to Chad Bergram. What happens if Congress hits an impasse when certifying the Electoral College? First, there's no game clock dictating that Congress has exhausted all options. But if Congress determines there's a stalemate, the 12th Amendment directs the House to elect the president. This is called a contingent election. The House has chosen two presidents via contingent elections, Thomas Jefferson in 1801 and John Quincy Adams in 1825. Each state casts one ballot as a House delegation during a contingent election. The House only considers the top three Electoral College vote getters in a contingent election, likely President Trump, Biden, and perhaps someone else. There have been 165 faithless electors in U.S. history. These are persons who vote for someone besides the candidates for whom they are pledged. Faithless electors in 2016 directed electoral votes to former Secretary of State Colin Powell, former Ohio Governor John Kasich, former Representative Ron Paul, and Senator Bernie Sanders and Faith Spotted Eagle. So one vote per state in a contingent election in the House. Republicans currently control 26 state delegations. Democrats control 22. Two states are essentially tied. The GOP holds more delegations than Democrats, but this is all decided in the new Congress. Moreover, dozens of House seats aren't settled yet. But here's the problem for Democrats. California has 53 House seats, but California only counts as a solitary vote in a contingent election. By contrast, South Dakota has but one House seat, but all states are equal in a contingent election. So it's possible that South Dakota or other small states would offset California's presumptive delegation vote for Biden. The House wing of the Capitol wasn't complete when House members met for the contingent election back in 1801 between Jefferson, Aaron Burr, and the sitting president, John Adams, the top three electoral vote getters. So House members huddled in what is now the office of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell on the Senate side of the Capitol to choose the third American president. Contingent election haggling consumed 6 days. Members finally broke on the 36th ballot, propelling Jefferson to the presidency. Nothing is written in the Constitution as to how long Congress has to work out who is president in a contingent election. But what happens if the House hasn't picked a president by noon on January 20th? That's the constitutionally mandated day and time to inaugurate a president. That is where the 20th Amendment and the Presidential Succession Act kicks in. If the House remains stymied at noon on January 20th, there is no president nor vice president. The terms of President Trump and Vice President Pence expire, but there is a Speaker of the House next in line to the presidency. That is where Pelosi, by statute, becomes acting president, not president, but acting president. If nothing is settled on January 20th, this could create what scholars refer to as the two-claim scenario. That's where two people say they are rightfully the president on January 20th. The U.S. came close to 2 claims with Hayes and Tilden in 1877. A backroom deal ultimately awarded the presidency to Hayes, even starting off a Senate filibuster. Congress determined Hayes won the Electoral College 185 to 184. Tilden captured the popular vote by just 3 points.